So we'll entitle this one Navy SEALs in Distress Part 2. I've been doing some more research on this, and it turns out there's been some documentaries done on casino wars, because it's kind of legendary in the western states, at least, as far as warring tribal factions in these things. And we're not talking small amounts of money here. Apparently, according to the factions in dispute, there's $20 to $50 million missing, and in the midst of that, they were all getting into the hired gun business and hiring relatively high-end talent to enforce their will in the dispute over the casino ownership and tribal government. Wow, where have we seen that before? Oil wells, oil fields, and what we're seeing is a bunch of the same militarization stuff going on, where they're fucking up the situation in that almost as bad as they fucked up the situation in the Middle East. And, dare I say, some of the same players involved. And the state of California stepped in because this was happening in the midst of a whole bunch of tourists. Okay? And you got to also realize that I was looking carefully. There's a bunch of videos related to this Chukansi casino. The Indians themselves wouldn't fight each other. They're all pointing the finger to get somebody else to fight each other. One faction says, well, call the sheriff, I don't like you, and he's staring at the other guy and all this kind of stuff. You know, really posturing and staring at the other guy. I'm going to call the police. The other guy's calling his mercenaries. The other people are calling their security company. You know, the whole, I'll hire somebody to kick your ass. And there were guys who volunteered for that kind of work. And now some of them are in trouble. This isn't the gun and patriot community issue. Okay? If James Yeager and his friends, you know, want to take issue with that and that sort of a situation, listen, guys, I don't know what all you have over in Tennessee or Kentucky and that part of the country, but you know, these guys knew what they were getting hired for, what they got into when they got into that game. Okay. Something tells me that if I had gone all the way in some of those conflicts, there would have been no mercy or sympathy for me doing merc work in that avenue of employment. There would have been none. Okay. These guys, and somebody in this faction has or spent or got a hold of $20 million or feels they have an interest in $20 million, and they're going to be hitting the rest of us up for, you know, $10, $20, $30, $100 donations to get their guys out of jail after they played hardcore. Kind of reminds me of a guy I worked with named Vernon. I was back in the county where I used to do some of that work. He was a guy who ran a security company, older guy, but he was a scrapper, never backed down from a fight. He was very loyal to his faction, the faction that hired him. You know, he was a guy who had been rejected from law enforcement primarily because of his age. He you know, exercised a lot of loyalty for anybody that hired him, up to the point where he was involved in one of these standoff situations, this, and that. The thing about Vernon was he was not an Indian. So when one of the warrior types from the opposing faction stepped up on him, as the story went, Vern blew the guy's leg off with a 12 gauge, because they said, hey, whatever happens in all this stuff, a non-Indian can't kill an Indian. So he blew the guy's leg off. You know, Vern ended up going to prison, and he was pretty old to begin with, so I'm not quite sure, you know, how long he went. And but you know, they wanted to hire a junkyard dog to do what they did, to do what they wanted, and then they turned on him. Okay, they just were like, oh, okay, put him away or put him down. That's you know, that's what happens when you work with these people, man. You're disposed. Life is cheaper than pride with those people. Okay, and there's a lot of videos out there of this conflict that you can't see casino. Okay, I can see a bunch of self-important, arrogant guys who got a bunch of money and they're throwing around and having their ego, and this guy's like, I don't like him. Well, bring my car around it. Okay, man. You guys agreed to do a job for a price. I don't know. Hopefully you were well paid. But that's what's going on with all this thing, man. So asking the general public, by the way, I'm a Special Forces veteran, and can you help pay my bail? Keep that within your community, okay? Anyway, I'm going to weigh in on this. This is not our issue, okay? And as far as like being a state or anti-state or corruption of that sheriff, well, it's California, okay? Now let's look at something else. Any of those people make like major donations to the NRA in the last 20 years? Are they running federal law only gun shops onto casinos? I had brought that up with several tribal leaders in different places that were looking for business, and I said, listen, you know, you could open gun shops like a Cabela's style place at the same resort places where the casinos are. You could open a Cabela's style place that's under federal law only, so that when you have a you know, gun purchases and stuff like that, they only fall under federal law. And whether or not something leaves the casino grounds in the trunk of their car or not is in their business, okay? That's the way this would work. Kind of like Aries Armor doing the partially complete ARs. I told a lot of these people, I said, you know, we could sell high capacity magazines in on tribal land, and I believe it's federal law only. You know, let's make some money and say fuck you to the government, to the federal government and the laws. They didn't want to upset anything with their liquor licenses and other aspects that the BATF might govern, and they really didn't want to be like involved in my politics. Well, great. That way, when the ARM guys like going on a spiel about tribal sovereignty and all that, I'm like, yeah, okay, thanks, whatever, man. The reality is, you guys have had the money, you've had the legal connections, and the wherewithal to do a little bit more on, you know, the rest of the Bill of Rights with using mechanisms of tribal government and sovereignty, and they weren't doing it. Okay, we're talking about guys who buy fucking brand new Corvettes for their 16-year-old daughters, and you know, as far as doing anything for the Second Amendment. A little bit. There was one casino here in Oregon that was running gun shows. I did some business out of there for a little while. Who's hiking through the casino wanting to buy guns from me is gypsy jokers, like wearing colors. And I'm thinking, might be a liability issue here. So I went back there once, okay, and so you know, they were nice to me. You know, they kind of, you know, it was okay, but then it was like, they got other business going on. It was much more lucrative, and they really didn't want to put themselves at risk on anything right to keep and bear arms related. And that's generally what's going to happen with any of that mob or casino type stuff. That's why, if hypothetically speaking, I had any family members that were involved in that world, there's a reason why we're not on speaking terms, okay? Our politics don't match, and I don't like getting treated like like if I show up, I'm asking for money or a favor. At this point, I'm not. Okay, there are people I would tell, don't piss on me if I'm on fire. That's that. Okay, and as far as e-begging for contributions because somebody's hired mercs got in trouble in a legal quagmire in that type of situation, I don't know what's next. Are we going to start raising money to pay ransom for hostages? I got an idea. Let's take a bunch of old airplane tires and anti-aircraft missiles and trade them for hostages in Iran. Then what? You're going to get fucking elected to something? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I would suggest anybody wanting to weigh in on this issue, go look up some linked stuff here on the Chukansi casino conflict. I'm not an Indian. Somebody out there has got $20 to $50 million that they've apparently collected, and they're trying to throw around and argue over who owns that stuff. And something tells me they don't need 20 or $50 from me on their issue.